Happy Thursday. I was going to do all sorts of chit-chatting. I think people just want to finish the book. Let's just finish it, huh? Last Day of Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. Starting on chapter 24. Let's see. Ma Tuck got hauled away to the jail by the constable, the sheriff guy, because she whacked the man in the yellow suit in the head with a shotgun. She used it like a club. And the reason why she did that is because he was going to take Winnie and use her as a demonstration on how the water works. And he was going to sell the water because he got the woods from the Tucks. And May couldn't stand it, so she had to just wallop him. So now she goes to jail, and the bad news is the man, or maybe the good news, I don't know, is the man in the yellow suit is dead. So now May's going to hang. Well, how's that going to work out? How do you hang somebody who can't be killed? Anyway, they're going to break her out of prison, and Winnie they're going to pull the window out because Miles knows all about carpentry. And Winnie's going to take her place inside the jail and like frump up, the blankets and stuff, make it look like she's still in there. And the Tucks are going to take off and bring Ma Tuck with them. And that's how they're going to get out. Oh, and the other part is Winnie's got a little tiny bottle of water. And Jesse said, wait till you're 17. Seems like a great plan. Drink the water when you're 17. Find me. We'll somehow figure that out. Together forever. 17. Man. The clock was ticking steadily. The darkness was complete. Outside, the night seemed poised on tiptoe, waiting, holding its breath for the storm. Winnie stole out to the hall and frowned at the clock face in the shadows. At last, she could make it out, for the black Roman numerals were just barely visible against their white ground. The brass hands glowed faintly. As she peered at them, the long hand snapped forward one more notch. With a loud click, she had not missed her moment. It was 5 minutes to midnight. Chapter 24. Leaving the house was so easy, Winnie felt faintly shocked. She had half expected that the instant she put her foot on the stairs, they would leap from their beds and surround her with accusations. But no one stirred, and she was struck by the realization that if she chose, she could slip out night after night without their knowing. The thought made her feel more guilty than ever, that she should once more take advantage of their trust. But tonight, this one last time, she had to. There was no other way. She opened the door and slipped out into the heavy August night. Leaving the cottage was like leaving something real and moving into a dream. Her body felt weightless, and she seemed to float down the path to the gate. Jesse was there, waiting. Neither of them spoke. He took her hand and they ran together, lightly down the road, past the other sleeping cottages into the dim and empty center of the village. The big glass windows here were lidded eyes that didn't care, that barely saw them, barely gave them back reflections. The blacksmith's shop, the mill, the church, the stores, so busy and alive in daylight, were hunched down, deserted now, dark piles and shapes without a purpose or a meaning. And then ahead, when he saw the jailhouse, its new wood still unpainted, lamplight spilling through a window at the front, and there, in the cleared yard behind it, like a great L upside down, was the gallows. Like an L upside down, they hang the rope from here, and then you hang here. The sky flashed white, but this time it wasn't heat lightning. For a few moments later, a low rumble, still far away, announced at last the coming storm. A fresh breeze lifted Winnie's hair, and from somewhere in the village behind them, a dog barked. Two shadows detached themselves from the gloom as Winnie and Jesse came up. Tuck pulled her to him and hugged her hard, and Miles squeezed her hand. No one said a word. Then the four of them crept into the back of the building. Here, too high for Winnie to see into, was a barred window, through which, from the room in front, light glowed faintly. Winnie peered up at it, at the blackness of the bars with the dim gold of the light between. Into her head came lines from an old poem. Stone walls do not a prison make, no iron bars a cage. We'll have to look that up, see what that's from. Over and over, the lines repeated themselves in her head till they were altogether meaningless. Another roll of thunder sounded. The storm was moving nearer. Then Miles was standing on a box. He was pouring oil around the frame of the window. A swirl of wind brought the thick, rich smell of it down to Winnie's nostrils. Tuck handed up a tool, and Miles began to pry at the nails, securing the window frame. Miles knew carpentry. Miles could do the job. Winnie shivered and held tight to Jessie's hand. One nail was free. Another. Tuck reached up to receive them as they came down one by one. A fourth nail screeched as it was pried up, and Miles poured on more oil. From the front of the jailhouse, the constable yawned noisily and began to whistle. The whistling came nearer. Miles dropped down. They heard the constable's footsteps coming up to May's cell. The barred door clanked. Then the footsteps receded, and the whistling grew fainter. An inner door shut, and the lamp glow disappeared. At once, Miles was up again, prying at the nails. An eighth was out, a ninth, a 10th. Winnie counted carefully, while behind her, counting, her mind sang, "Some walls do not a prison make." Miles handed down the prying tool. He grasped the bars of the window firmly, ready to pull, and stood poised. What is he waiting for, thought Winnie. Why doesn't he? Then a flash of lightning, and soon after a crack of thunder, and in the midst of the noise, Miles gave a mighty heave. But the window did not budge. The thunder ebbed. Winnie's heart sank. What if it was all impossible? What if the window would never come out? What if... She looked over her shoulders at the dark shape of the gallows and shuddered. Again a flash of lightning, and this time a crashing burst of noise from the swirling sky. Miles yanked. The window frame sprang free, and still grasping it by the bars, he tumbled backward off the box. The job was done. Two arms appeared at the hole left by the missing frame. May! Her head appeared. It was too dark to see her face. The window! What if it was too small to squeeze her through? What if... But now her shoulders were out. She groaned softly. Another flash of lightning lit her face for an instant, and Winnie saw an expression there of deep concentration. Tip of the tongue protruding, brows furrowed. Now Tuck was on the box, helping her, giving her his own shoulders to pull on. Miles and Jessie close at his sides, arms upstretched, eager to receive her bulk. Her hips were free. Now, look out! Here she came! Her skirts tearing on the rough edges of the boards, arms flailing, and they were all in a heap on the ground. Another flash of thunder muffled Jessie's bursting, excellent laugh. May was free. Winnie clasped her trembling hands thankfully, and then the first drop of rain dropped precisely on the tip of her nose. The Tucks untangled themselves and turned to her, one by one as the rain began. They drew her to them and kissed her. One by one she kissed them back. Was it rain on May's face? On Tuck's? Or was it tears? Jessie was last. He put his arms around her and hugged her tight and whispered the single word, "Remember." Then Miles was on the box again, lifting her. Her hands grasped the edges of the window. This time she waited with him. When the thunder came, it tore the sky apart with its roar, and as it came, she pulled herself through and dropped onto the cot inside, unharmed. She looked up at the open square and saw the frame with Miles' hands holding it. The next obliging roll of thunder saw it wedged once more into place. And then, would Miles put back the nails? She waited. Rain came in sheets now, riding the wind, flung crossway through the night. Lightning crackled, a brilliant, jagged streak, and thunder rattled the little building. The tension in the parched earth eased and vanished. Winnie felt it go. The muscles of her stomach loosened, and all at once, she was exhausted. Still she waited. Would Miles put back the nails? At last, standing tiptoe on the cot, she grasped the bars of the window, pulling herself up until she could just see through. Rain blew into her face, but at the next flash of lightning, looking down, she saw that the yard was empty. And before the thunder followed, in a pause while wind and rain held back for one brief moment, she thought she heard fading into the distance the tinkling little melody of the music box. The Tucks, her darling Tucks, were gone. Chapter 25. The first week of August was long over, and now, though autumn was still some weeks away, there was a feeling that the year had begun its downward arc, that the wheel was turning again, slowly now, but soon to go faster, turning once more in its changeless sweep of change. Winnie, standing at the fence in front of the Touch-Me-Not cottage, could hear the new note of the voices of the birds. Whole clouds of them lifted, chattering into the sky above the wood, and then settled only to lift again. Across the road, goldenrod was coming into bloom, and an early drying milkweed had opened its rough pod, exposing a host of downy-headed seeds. As she watched, one of these detached itself onto the sudden breeze and sailed sedately off, while others leaned from the pod as if to observe its departure. When he dropped down cross-legged on the grass, 2 weeks had gone by since the night of the storm, the night of May Tuck's escape, and May had not been found. There was no trace of her at all, or of Tuck, or Miles, or Jessie. Winnie was profoundly grateful for that, but she was also profoundly tired. It had been a trying 2 weeks. For the 100th time she reviewed it all, how the constable had come into the cell room soon after she had settled herself onto the cot, how he had let down a shutter over the window to keep the rain out, and then he had stood over her as she hunched under the blanket, her breath heavy, trying to look as large as possible, how, finally, he had gone away and not come back till morning. But she had not dared to sleep, for fear she would kick off the blanket and give herself away, and give the Tucks away unwittingly. So she had lain there, pulse thudding, eyes wide open. She would never forget the rattle of the rain on the jailhouse roof, or the smell of the wet wood, or the darkness that had saved them all, or how difficult it was not to cough. She had wanted to cough as soon as it occurred to her that she mustn't, and she passed a long hour trying to swallow away the tickle that perversely constricted her throat. And she would never forget the crash outside that made her heart race, that she could not investigate and did not understand till morning, when on the way home she saw that the gallows had blown over in the wind. But oh, it made her tremble just to remember the constable's face when he found her. She had first heard a bustling in the front of the jail and smelled fresh coffee and sat up stiff with apprehension. Then the inner door opened, the door she now saw, which separated the office from the pair of cells, and in the light that streamed before him, the constable appeared, carrying a breakfast tray. He whistled cheerfully. He came up to the barred door of her cell and looked in, and his whistling died on his lips as if it had run down and needed to be wound up again. But this comical astonishment lasted for only a moment, and then his face flushed red with anger. When he had sat on the cot, eyes downcast, feeling very small and very like a criminal. In fact, he was soon shouting that if she were older, he'd have to keep her there. It was a crime what she had done. She was an accomplice. She had helped a murderer escape. She was, in fact, a criminal, but too young to be punished by the law. Worse luck, he told her, for she badly needed punishing. She was released then to the custody of her mother and father, and these new words, accomplice and custody, chilled her blood. Over and over they asked her, shocked at first and then wistful. Why had she done such a thing? Why? She was their daughter. They had trusted her. They had tried to bring her up properly with a true sense of right and wrong. They did not understand. And finally, she had sobbed the only truth there was into her mother's shoulders, the only explanation. The Tucks were her friends. She had done it because, in spite of everything, she loved them. This, of all things, her family understood, and afterward they drew together staunchly around her. It was hard for them in the village. Winnie knew it was, and the knowledge gave her pain, for they were proud, and she had shamed them. Still, this side of the affair was not without its benefits, for at least Winnie. Though she was confined to the yard indefinitely, she could go nowhere, not even with her mother or her grandmother. The other children wandered by to look at her, to talk to her through the fence. They were impressed by what she had done. She was a figure of romance to them now, where before she had been too neat, too prissy, almost somehow too clean to be a real friend. Winnie sighed and plucked at the grass around her ankles. School would soon open. It wouldn't be so bad. In fact, she thought as her spirits lifted, this year might be rather nice. And then two things happened. First of all, the toad appeared out of the weeds, on her side of the road this time. It bounced out of a cover of an old dandelion leaves and landed, plop, just beyond the fence. If she had reached her hand through the bars, she could have touched it. And next, a large brown dog with an easy gait and a dangling tongue came loping down the road toward them. He stopped opposite the fence and looked at Winnie with a friendly swish of his tail, and then he saw the toad. At once he began to bark, his eyes bright. He pranced up, his hindquarters leaping independently from side to side, nose close to the toad, his voice shrill with enthusiasm. "Don't!" cried Winnie, leaping to her feet and flapping her arms. "Go away, dog! Stop that! Go away! Shoo!" The dog paused. He looked up at Winnie's frantic dancing, and then he looked at the toad, who had pressed down close to the dirt, eyes tight shut. It was too much for him. He began to bark again and reached out a long paw. "Oh," cried Winnie, "don't do that! Now leave my toad alone!" And before she had time to realize what she was doing, she bent, reached through the bars, and snatched the toad up and away from harm, dropping it on the grass inside the fence. A feeling of revulsion swept through her. While the dog whined, pawing uselessly at the fence, she stood rigid, staring at the toad, wiping her hand again and again on the skirt of her dress. And then she remembered the actual feel of the toad, and the revulsion passed. She knelt and touched the skin of its back. It was rough and soft both at once, and cool. Winnie stood up and looked at the dog. He was waiting outside the fence, his head on one side, peering at her longingly. "It's my toad," Winnie told him, "so you better leave it alone." And then on an impulse, she turned and ran into the cottage, up into her room, to the bureau drawer where she had hidden Jessie's bottle, the bottle of water from the spring. And in a moment she was back again. The toad still squatted where she had dropped it. The dog still waited at the fence. Winnie pulled out the cork from the mouth of the bottle and, kneeling, she poured the precious water very slowly and carefully over the toad. The dog watched this operation, and then, yawning, he was suddenly bored. He turned and loped away, back down the road to the village. When he picked up the toad and held it for a long time without the least disgust in the palm of her hand, it sat calmly blinking, and the water glistened on its back. The little bottle was empty now. It lay on the grass at Winnie's feet. But if all of it was true, there was more water in the wood. There was plenty more, just in case, when she was 17. If she should decide there was more water in the wood. Winnie smiled, and then she stopped and put her hand through the fence and set the toad free. "There," she said, "you're safe. Forever." Epilogue. It's like the story after the story. The sign said, "Welcome to Tree Gap," but it was hard to believe this was really Tree Gap. The main street hadn't changed so very much, but there were many other streets now crossing the main street. The road itself was blacktopped. There was a white line painted down its center. May and Tuck, on the seat of the clattering wooden wagon, bumped slowly into Tree Gap behind the fat old horse. They had seen continuous change, and were accustomed to it, but here it seemed shocking and sad. "Look," said Tuck. "Look, May. Ain't that where the wood used to be? It's gone. Not a stick or a stump left. And her cottage, that's gone too." It was very hard to recognize anything, but from the little hill which had once lain outside the village and was now very much a part of it, they thought they could figure things out. "Yes," said May, "that's where it was, I do believe. Of course, it's been so long since we were here, I can't tell for certain." There was a gas station there now. A young man in greasy coveralls was polishing the windshield of a wide and rusty Hudson automobile. As May and Tuck rolled past, the young man grinned and said to the driver of the Hudson, who lounged at the wheel, "Looky there, in from the country for a big time." And they chuckled together. May and Tuck clattered on into the village proper, past a Catholic mixture of houses, which soon gave way to shops and other places of business. A hot dog stand, a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, a 5 and 10, another gas station, a tall white frame building with a pleasant veranda, the Tree Gap Hotel, family dining, easy rates, the post office. Beyond that, the jailhouse, but a larger jailhouse now, painted brown, with an office for the county clerk. A black and white police car was parked in front with a red glass searchlight on its roof and a radio antenna, like a buggy whip fastened to the windshield. May glanced at the jailhouse, but looked away quickly. "See beyond there?" she said, pointing. "That diner? Let's stop there and get a cup of coffee, all right?" "All right," said Tuck. "Maybe they'll know something." Inside, the diner gleamed with chrome and smelled like linoleum and ketchup. May and Tuck took seats on rumbling swivel stools at the long counter. The counterman emerged from the kitchen at the rear and sized them up expertly. They looked all right, a little queer maybe, their clothes especially, but honest. He slapped a cardboard menu down in front of them and leaned on the foaming orangeade cooler. "You folks from off?" he asked. "Yep," said Tuck, "just passing through." "Sure," said the counterman. "Say," said Tuck cautiously, fingering the menu, "hey, didn't there used to be a Wood once down the other side of town?" "Oh, sure," said the counterman. "Had a big electrical storm there, though, about 3 years ago, thereabouts. Big tree got hit by lightning, split right down the middle, caught fire and everything. Tore up the ground, too. Had the bulldozer all out." "Oh," said May. "Oh," said Tuck, and he and May exchanged glances. "Coffee, please," said May. "Black, for both of us." "Sure," said the counterman, and he took the menus away and poured the coffee into thick pottery mugs and leaned again on the orangeade cooler. "Used to be a freshwater spring in that wood," said Tuck boldly, sipping his coffee. "I don't know nothing about that," said the counterman. "Had the bulldozer all out, like I say." Said Tuck. Afterward, while May was shopping for supplies, Tuck went back through the town on foot, back the way they had come, out to the little hill. There were houses there now, and a feed and grain store, but on the far side of the hill, inside a rambling iron fence, was a cemetery. Tuck's heart quickened. He had noticed the cemetery on his way in. May had seen it too. They had not spoken about it, but both knew it might hold the other answers. Tuck straightened his old jacket. He passed through an archway of wrought iron curlicues and paused, squinting at the weedy rows of gravestones. And then, far over to the right, he saw a tall monument, once no doubt imposing, but now tipped slightly sideways. On it was carved one name: Foster. Slowly, Tuck turned his footsteps toward the monument and saw as he approached that there were other, smaller markers all around it. A family plot. And then his throat closed, for it was there. He had wanted it to be there, and now that he saw it, he was overcome with sadness. He knelt and read the inscription. "In loving memory, Winifred Foster Jackson, dear wife, dear mother, 1870 to 1948. "So," said Tuck to himself, 2 years. She's been gone 2 years. He stood up and looked around, embarrassed, trying to clear the lump from his throat, but there was no one to see him. The cemetery was very quiet. In the branches of a willow behind him, a red-winged blackbird chirped. Tuck wiped his eyes hastily, and then he straightened his jacket again and drew up his hand in a brief salute. "Good girl," he said aloud, and he turned and left the cemetery, walking quietly. Later, as he and May rolled out of Tree Gap, May said softly, without looking at him, "She's gone?" Tuck nodded. She's gone, he answered. There was a long moment of silence between them, and then Ma said, Poor Jessie. He knowed it, though, said Tuck. At least he knowed she wasn't coming. We all knowed that long time ago. Oh, just the same, said May. She sighed, and then she sat up a little straighter. Well, where to now, Tuck? No need to come back here no more. That's so, said Tuck. We'll just head on out this way. We'll locate something. All right, said May. And then she put a hand on his arm and pointed, Oh, look out for that toad. Tuck had seen it too. He reined in the horse and climbed down from the wagon. The toad was squatting in the middle of the road, quite unconcerned. And in the other lane, a pickup truck rattled by, and against the breeze it made, the toad shut his eyes tightly, but it did not move. Tuck waited till the truck had passed, and when he picked up the toad and carried it to the weeds along the road's edge, Darn fool must think it's going to live forever, he said to May. And soon they were rolling on again, leaving Tree Gap behind, and as they went, the tinkling little melody of a music box drifted out behind them and was lost at last, far down the road. That's it. Sounds like Winnie didn't drink the water. Sounds like she grew up, married somebody, dear wife, dear mother, 1870 to 1948. So 30 plus 48, she was 78 when she died. She had a good long life. She got married, she had children. I wonder who she married. I wonder how often she thought of Jessie. Did she do the right thing? The toad, he made out. I wonder if he's happy. I hope you liked it. This is a good one. All right, well, take it easy. Adios, my friends.